0 to 4 minutes. That's all it took. A U.S. Navy supply ship detected incoming missiles and then disappeared beneath 2,400 feet of water. What sank with it wasn't just steel, it was 30,000 interceptor missiles, enough to sustain an entire fleet. But here's where it gets strange. Those missiles mattered more than the ship itself. At first glance, this looks like a single loss. It's not. Because the USNS Robert E. Peary wasn't just another vessel. It was a floating magazine, 689 feet long, carrying 41,000 tons, built to move one thing: firepower. And this time, it was loaded with the most expensive kind, SM-2 interceptors, $2.4 million each, SM-3 ballistic missile killers, $15 million each, SM-6 multi-role missiles, $4.3 million each, thousands more, ESSMs, RAM systems, Tomahawks, packed into every available space. Total value? $58 billion. But that number hides the real problem, because money can be replaced. Time can't. Standard logic says, if a ship is escorted, it should be safe, but the data reveals a paradox. Escorts don't guarantee survival anymore. At 3:51 a.m., the first wave arrived. 3 sea-skimming cruise missiles. Low, fast, hard to track. The escorting destroyer engaged. 2 were destroyed. That should have worked. It didn't. 1 slipped through, impacted the waterline, flooding but survivable. Then things got worse. 2 minutes later, the sky changed. Ballistic missiles. Not cruising, falling. Descending at over Mach 5, nearly vertical. The USS Gridley fired SM-3 interceptors. 1 hit, 1 missed, and that single miss changed everything. The missile punched through 3 decks before detonating inside the cargo hold. What happened next wasn't one explosion. It was a chain reaction. Missiles igniting missiles, fuel feeding fire, warheads cooking off in sequence. 6 minutes later, the ship broke in half. 14 minutes after that, it was gone. All 126 crew survived. The cargo didn't. And this is where most people misunderstand what happened. Because this isn't about how the ship sank. It's about what the fleet lost when it did. The U.S. Navy in that region depends on a supply chain stretching 8,000 miles, from factories in Arizona and California to ships on station. 3 links: production, transport, delivery. Iran didn't attack production. They didn't touch delivery. They cut the middle, transport, and without transport, the entire system stalls. Here's the math no one's talking about. There are roughly 14 major U.S. surface combatants in the region. Each carries vertical launch cells, missiles for defense. Total usable interceptors? Around 800. Now compare that to the threat. 1,400 ballistic missiles, 3,000 drones, launched in just 3 weeks. Even with a 75% interception rate, magazines drain fast. And the ship that was supposed to refill them? Gone. But here's the question nobody wants to answer. What happens when the missiles run out before the war does? The Navy has options. None are good. Pull ships back to rearm, lose coverage, stay in place, risk running empty, wait for resupply, weeks away. Every path trades safety for exposure. And this is where the timeline becomes dangerous. Replacing what was lost isn't quick. SM-2 production, 125 per year. SM-3, 60 per year. ESSM, 500 per year. The Peary was carrying years, sometimes over a decade, of output. Add it all up, and you get a number that sounds unreal. 47 years of production, sitting on the ocean floor. Yes, factories can surge. But even then, 18 to 24 months minimum to recover. And the war doesn't pause while you rebuild. Now zoom out. Iran's attack cost $5.2 million. The damage inflicted? $59 billion. That's not a battle. That's arithmetic. 1 to 11,000. And here's the uncomfortable part. Standard logic says the stronger military wins. But the data shows something else. The side with the cheaper equation wins. Iran can repeat a $5 million strike again, and again, and again. The United States cannot absorb a $59 billion loss more than once. So the question shifts, not who has better weapons, but who can afford to keep using them. But here's where it gets even more complicated. There are more supply ships, and they all have to pass through the same narrow corridors: Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Strait of Hormuz, all within range of coastal missile systems extending 300 kilometers offshore. Escorts help. But as we've seen, they're not enough. Because every interception burns another missile. Every defense drains the very resource you're trying to deliver. It's a loop. Protect the supply ship. Spend missiles. Need more supply ships. Create more targets. That loop breaks systems. And then the pattern shifts. Official statements say robust capabilities remain. But movements tell a different story. Ships are repositioning farther from the coast. Strike groups are delaying their entry. Supply routes now reroute around Africa, adding weeks. That should, in theory, signal confidence. Instead, it signals retreat. Now let's widen the lens again. The Red Sea carries about 12% of global trade. Oil, grain, everything. If military ships can't pass safely, what happens to commercial shipping? Insurance rates spike, routes change, costs ripple outward. This isn't just a military problem anymore. It's an economic one. And the price tag? Potentially hundreds of billions annually. So, what are the options? Escalate. Strike missile sites directly. But that risks a wider war. Increase escorts. Pull ships from other regions. But that creates gaps elsewhere. Or reduce presence. Accept less control. Every option solves one problem by creating another. And this is the part that rarely gets said out loud. Wars aren't lost when ships sink. They're lost when systems stop working. Right now, one number matters more than anything else. The United States has a limited number of supply ships. Iran has thousands of missiles. If one side can replace losses in days, and the other takes years, what happens next isn't unpredictable. It's inevitable. One ship is gone. 30,000 missiles are gone. A supply line just proved it can be broken. But here's the unresolved question. How many more breaks can the system take before the entire structure gives way?